The morning coffee was still steaming in Admiral Sarah Chen's mug when the universe changed forever. She was reviewing supply reports in her office aboard the UES Defiant, flagship of Earth's Fourth Fleet, when Lieutenant Commander Hayes burst through her door without knocking. "Admiral, you need to see this. Now." Sarah looked up from her datapad, noting the pale complexion and wide eyes of her normally composed communications officer. In 23 years of military service, she'd learned to read faces like tactical displays, and Hayes' expression screamed emergency. "What is it, Commander?" "We're receiving a transmission, ma'am. Origin unknown, but it's not human." The coffee mug hit the desk with a sharp clink. Sarah was already moving toward the door before Hayes finished speaking. They'd always known this day might come. Humanity's expansion into the galaxy had been predicated on the assumption that we weren't alone. But knowing something intellectually and experiencing it were two very different things. The bridge of the Defiant buzzed with controlled chaos. Officers hunched over their stations, voices low and urgent. The main display showed a waveform analysis of the incoming signal, clearly artificial, clearly intelligent, and definitely not of human origin. "Status report," Sarah commanded as she took her position in the captain's chair. "The signal started broadcasting approximately 12 minutes ago," reported Lieutenant Torres from the communications station. "It's coming from the Kepler 442 system, roughly 1,200 light-years away. The transmission is being repeated on multiple frequencies." "Language analysis?" "Computers working on it, but preliminary results suggest it's not based on any known human linguistic patterns. However, there are mathematical constants embedded in the signal that suggest an attempt at universal communication." Sarah nodded. First contact protocols had been drilled into every fleet officer, but the reality felt surreal. "Can you clean up the audio?" "Working on it now, Admiral." Torres' fingers flew across her console. "I'm applying filters to remove static and enhance the primary frequencies." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of machinery and the soft beeping of computers. Then, through the speakers, came a sound that would haunt Sarah's dreams for the rest of her life. It was a voice, unmistakably a voice, though unlike any human throat could produce. The tones were melodic, almost musical, but underneath the beauty lay something that made Sarah's blood run cold: desperation. "Keftar nala vesh. Keftar nala vesh. Thanaler sakti mordun kilisher. Vashta neem korvek thanaler." The alien words were followed by a series of tones that the computer immediately identified as mathematical sequences, prime numbers, then the Fibonacci sequence, then pi calculated to 50 decimal places. Then the voice returned, now speaking in heavily accented but recognizable English. This is First Singer Lyralii of the Zephyrian Collective. We broadcast on all frequencies in hopes that anyone, will hear our plea. The Devourer comes. The Devourer comes for us all." The bridge erupted in whispers and gasps. Sarah held up a hand for silence, her mind racing. The implications were staggering. Not only were they making first contact, but it was a cry for help. "We are peaceful people. We sing to the stars and tend to the gardens of 7 worlds. We have never known war, never built weapons of destruction. We believed the universe was kind, that intelligence would bring wisdom and compassion. We were wrong." The voice continued, growing more strained with each word. 3 cycles ago, they came to the Helix Nebula. Entire star systems went dark. No transmissions, no survivors, nothing but empty space where once there were billions of voices singing to the cosmos. The Devourer fleet consumes all in its path: metal, flesh, hope itself. Sarah felt her hands clench into fists. She'd heard similar stories from Earth's own dark history, the helpless crying out against the merciless, the peaceful being devoured by the warlike. But this was on a cosmic scale. "We estimate their fleet will reach our system in what you would call 18 of your days. We have evacuation ships, but they are slow and few. Most of our people will not escape. We send this message not in hope of rescue, we know we are too far from any who might help, but as a warning. The Devourer does not stop. They will come for you next, for all of us, until the galaxy is silent and cold. The transmission shifted to technical specifications, ship configurations, weapon signatures, fleet movements. The computer began analyzing the data, but Sarah was already thinking beyond the immediate crisis. If any receive this message, please remember us. Remember that we loved the music of the spheres, that we painted with light across the void, that we lived and dreamed and hoped. Do not let the galaxy forget that we existed. This is First Singer Lyralii, signing off. May the stars carry our song to kinder ears. The transmission ended with a haunting melody that seemed to echo through the bridge long after the speakers fell silent. Sarah sat in her chair, feeling the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. Around her, the crew waited for orders, but what orders could she give? They were 1,200 light-years away from the crisis, and even with humanity's fastest FTL drives, they'd need months to reach the Kepler 442 system. Admiral? Commander Hayes' voice broke through her thoughts. Analysis, Sarah said simply. The technical data is extensive, reported Lieutenant Wong from the tactical station. They're describing a fleet of unprecedented size, thousands of vessels, ranging from small frigates to massive dreadnoughts. Weapon signatures suggest energy-based systems far beyond our current technology. How far beyond? Wong hesitated. Conservative estimate? They're about 50 years ahead of us in terms of destructive capability. But there's something else, Admiral. According to their data, this Devourer fleet doesn't just destroy, it harvests. They're stripping entire worlds of resources, including biological matter. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Show me the fleet composition. The main display shifted to show a tactical breakdown based on the Zephyrian data. The numbers were staggering, over 3,000 vessels of various classes, organized into what appeared to be hunting packs. Each pack was centered around a massive command ship, supported by escort vessels and specialized harvesting craft. My God, whispered Commander Hayes. It's like a locust swarm, but with starships. Analysis of their expansion pattern? Sarah asked. They're moving in a rough spiral toward the galactic core, Torres reported. Based on the Zephyrian data and reports from other systems, they're systematically consuming everything in their path. At their current rate of expansion. How long until they reach human space? Approximately 18 months to 2 years, depending on their exact route and how long they spend harvesting each system. The bridge fell silent again. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to process the magnitude of what they were facing. Humanity had been so proud of its expansion into the galaxy, establishing colonies on dozens of worlds and building a respectable fleet of warships. But compared to this threat, they were children playing with toys. Admiral, Lieutenant Torres said quietly, there's something else. The transmission included coordinates for other systems that have sent out distress calls. 17 different species, all facing the same threat. Sarah opened her eyes. Show me. The display shifted to show a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, with red dots marking the locations of known Devourer attacks and yellow dots showing the positions of the distress signals. The pattern was clear, a wave of destruction moving steadily through the galaxy, consuming everything in its path. Options, Sarah said to her senior staff. We could try to reach out to the other species, suggested Hayes. Pool our resources, coordinate a defense. With what? Wong shook his head. Even if we could communicate with them all, even if we could coordinate our fleets, we're talking about dozens of species with maybe a few hundred ships each against a force of thousands. Then what do you suggest, Lieutenant? Sarah's voice carried an edge of frustration. We run, Wong said bluntly. We evacuate as many people as we can, find somewhere beyond their expansion pattern, and hope they don't follow. And abandon everyone else? Every other species in the galaxy? Admiral, with respect, what choice do we have? This isn't a fight we can win with conventional tactics. Sarah stared at the display, watching the red dots that marked the deaths of entire civilizations. Something stirred in her chest, not just anger, but a deep, primal fury that she recognized from humanity's own bloody history. It was the same feeling that had driven her ancestors to stand at Thermopylae, to charge at Gettysburg, to storm the beaches at Normandy. The feeling that some things were worth dying for. No, she said quietly. Admiral? I said no, Commander. We're not running. Sarah stood, her voice growing stronger. Patch me through to Fleet Command. Priority Alpha transmission. Ma'am, that will take hours to reach Earth. I know how long it takes, Lieutenant. Do it. As Torres began establishing the connection, Sarah turned to address her bridge crew. I want you all to understand something. What we've heard today changes everything. The galaxy is under attack by a force that doesn't negotiate, doesn't show mercy, and doesn't stop. They're coming for us whether we run or fight. She paused, looking each officer in the eye. But we're not like the other species they've encountered. We're not peaceful gardeners or star singers or philosophers. We're humans. We're from Earth, a world that spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of war. We're the descendants of apex predators who fought their way to the top of the food chain on a planet that tried to kill us every single day. The bridge was dead silent now, every officer hanging on her words. The Devourers think they're the ultimate predators? They're about to learn what happens when you threaten a Deathworld species. They want to harvest us like sheep? Sarah's voice rose to a sharp growl. They're about to discover that sheep don't build nuclear weapons. Sheep don't perfect orbital bombardment. Sheep don't look at an impossible enemy and say, challenge accepted. She turned back to the main display, where the wave of red dots continued their inexorable advance. We're going to rally every human fleet in the galaxy. We're going to coordinate with every other species willing to fight. And we're going to show these Devourers what happens when you pick a fight with Earth. Admiral, Hayes said carefully, the odds. The odds, Sarah interrupted, are irrelevant. The Spartans were outnumbered at Thermopylae. The RAF was outnumbered in the Battle of Britain. The Continental Army was outnumbered at Valley Forge. But they didn't fight because they thought they could win. They fought because they knew that some things are worth dying for, and that sometimes, just sometimes, the impossible becomes possible when you refuse to give up. She moved to the communications station. Torres, is that connection to Fleet Command ready? Yes, Admiral. You're live to Earth. Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would echo through history. Fleet Command, this is Admiral Sarah Chen aboard the UES Defiant. We have received first contact with an alien species and confirmed the existence of a galaxy-spanning threat. I am hereby invoking Protocol 7 and requesting immediate implementation of the Ragnarok Doctrine. The reply came after a long pause, the delay highlighting the vast distance between the Defiant and Earth. Admiral Chen, this is Fleet Admiral Morrison. Did you just say Protocol 7? Affirmative, sir. We are facing an existential threat to not just humanity, but all intelligent life in the galaxy. The enemy is a fleet of thousands of vessels with technology significantly superior to our own. They are systematically consuming entire star systems and will reach human space within 2 years. Another pause, even longer this time. Sarah could imagine the chaos erupting in Fleet Command as officers scrambled to verify what she was telling them. Admiral, I need you to transmit all available data immediately. If what you're saying is true, we're looking at a complete mobilization of human forces. Understood, sir. Transmitting now. Sarah nodded to Torres, who began uploading the Zephyrian data to Earth. Admiral Chen, came Morrison's voice again, assuming your data is accurate, you're talking about a war unlike anything humanity has ever faced. Yes, sir. And that's exactly why we're going to win. As the transmission ended, Sarah felt the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. She just committed humanity to a war against impossible odds, with an enemy they barely understood, to save species they'd never met. It was insane. It was hopeless. It was absolutely, completely human. Commander Hayes, she said, signal the fleet. All ships are to prepare for immediate departure. Destination, Admiral? Sarah looked at the star map, her finger tracing the path between human space and the Kepler 442 system. We're going to Kepler 442. It's time the galaxy learned what humans do when someone threatens our friends. Admiral, Wong protested, we can't possibly reach them in time. Even at maximum FTL speed, it would take months.
Then we'll mourn them, and we'll make sure their sacrifice means something, Sarah replied grimly.
But we're not going to Kepler 442 to save the Zephyrians. We're going there to learn everything we can about our enemy.
And then we're going to start the fight of our lives. The Defiant and her escort fleet departed human space 6 hours later, their destination a star system that would likely be nothing but debris by the time they arrived. Behind them, across dozens of human colonies, the greatest military mobilization in the species' history was beginning. The journey to Kepler 442 took 8 weeks of hard FTL travel, pushing the ship's drives to their limits. During that time, Sarah and her staff worked around the clock, analyzing every piece of data from the Zephyrian transmission and coordinating with the massive fleet that was assembling in human space. The response had been overwhelming. When the news broke that humanity was facing an existential threat, every colony, every corporation, every military unit had responded. The orbital shipyards of Mars worked triple shifts. The asteroid mining operations of the belt began producing raw materials at unprecedented rates. Even the civilian population demanded to contribute, with volunteers flooding recruitment centers and private spacecraft being converted for military use. But it was the response from other species that truly surprised Sarah. 3 days after the initial transmission, they had received messages from 12 different alien civilizations, all of whom had received similar distress calls. The Zephyrians, it turned out, had been busy in their final days, sending out their warning to every species they could reach. The Krotak Empire, a militaristic race of reptilian warriors, had been the first to respond. Their message was brief and to the point: "We stand with you, humans. The Devourer will find us ready." The Ethereal Collective, a coalition of energy beings from the Veil Nebula, had offered their advanced shielding technology. The Titan clans, massive humanoids from high-gravity worlds, had pledged their heavy assault ships. Even the enigmatic archivists, who had previously avoided all contact with other species, had broken their isolation to offer their knowledge of ancient defensive strategies. By the time the Fourth Fleet reached the edge of the Kepler 442 system, they were no longer alone. A growing alliance of species was forming, all united by a single goal: survival. Admiral, Lieutenant Torres reported as they dropped out of FTL, "We're receiving multiple contacts. The system is crowded." Sarah moved to the main display, her breath catching as she saw what awaited them. The Kepler 442 system was indeed crowded, but not with the living. The debris field stretched across millions of kilometers, the scattered remains of what had once been a thriving star system. Twisted metal, fragments of cities, and the broken hulks of spacecraft drifted in the void like a memorial to the Zephyrians' final stand. "Dear God," whispered Commander Hayes. "Sensor analysis," Sarah ordered, her voice steady despite the horror before them. "The destruction is total," Wong reported. 7 planets, completely stripped of resources. The asteroids and moons have been harvested as well. It's like they took everything: atmosphere, water, even the planetary cores. Life signs? Negative. But Admiral, there's something else. I'm detecting artificial structures near the 4th planet's orbit. They're not Zephyrian. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Show me. The display zoomed in on a series of geometric objects floating in the debris field. They were clearly artificial, but their design was unlike anything in human databases. Sleek, predatory lines with weapon ports that gaped like hungry mouths. Even dead and drifting, they radiated menace. "Those are Devourer ships," Sarah said quietly. "The ones that didn't make it out." "Confirmed. I'm reading significant battle damage. It looks like the Zephyrians put up more of a fight than expected." Sarah nodded grimly. The peaceful Star Singers had discovered their warrior hearts in their final moments. "Launch recovery teams. I want every piece of Devourer technology we can salvage. And see if you can find any Zephyrian survivors." The next several hours were a mix of triumph and heartbreak. The recovery teams found no survivors. The Devourers had been thorough, but they did recover significant amounts of alien technology. More importantly, they found something else: a hidden data cache that the Zephyrians had managed to conceal in the debris field. It's a complete intelligence package, Torres reported as they decoded the cache. Fleet movements, technology specifications, even communication protocols. The Zephyrians were recording everything about their attackers. And Sarah leaned forward in her chair. The Devourers aren't just a fleet, Admiral. They're a machine intelligence, artificial beings that have been consuming the galaxy for millennia. They reproduce by converting raw materials into more ships, more weapons, more of themselves. That explains the systematic approach, Hayes observed. They're not conquering territory, they're farming resources. There's more, Torres continued. According to the Zephyrian data, the Devourers have a weakness. They're controlled by a central intelligence network, a series of command ships that coordinate the entire fleet. If those ships were destroyed, the rest of the fleet would be crippled, Sarah finished. Where are these command ships? That's the problem. They stay in the center of the fleet, protected by thousands of escort vessels. Getting to them would require a direct assault through the entire enemy fleet, Sarah said quietly. A suicide mission. Unless Wong was studying the tactical displays. Admiral, what if we don't try to fight through them? What if we bring the fight to us? Sarah turned to face her tactical officer. Explain. The Devourers are systematic. They move from system to system, harvesting everything before moving on. But what if we could force them to come to us? What if we could choose the battlefield? You're talking about a trap. I'm talking about the greatest ambush in galactic history. We know their route, their tactics, their weaknesses. We have 18 months to prepare, and we're not doing it alone. Sarah looked at the debris field surrounding them, the silent testimony to the Zephyrians' courage. They had died fighting, but their sacrifice had given the galaxy something precious, knowledge, and time to use it. Send a message to Fleet Command, she ordered. Tell them we're coming home, and we're bringing friends. It's time to plan a welcome party for the Devourers. What kind of party, Admiral? Sarah smiled grimly. The kind that Earth specializes in. The kind where the guests don't leave alive. The return journey to human space took 6 weeks, but Sarah's fleet was no longer alone. They had been joined by ships from a dozen different species, all carrying refugees, technology, and most importantly, a burning desire for revenge. The first to join them had been the Krotak Empire's third warfleet, led by Battle Commander Thektar. The Krotak were everything the Zephyrians had not been, a warrior species that had evolved on a world of constant conflict. Their ships were brutal, efficient weapons of war, and their crews were eager for battle. Your plan has merit, Human Admiral, Thektar had said during their first joint briefing. But it will require sacrifice. Many will die. Many will die anyway if we do nothing, Sarah had replied. At least this way, their deaths will mean something. The Krotak had nodded approvingly. They understood the mathematics of war. The ethereal collective had been more cautious, but their contribution was invaluable. As beings of pure energy, they could interface directly with computer systems, making them ideal for electronic warfare. Their leader, a shifting pattern of light called synthesis, had offered their expertise in disrupting the Devourer command network. The machine minds are strong, synthesis had communicated through their translation matrix, but they think in patterns. Patterns can be broken. The Titan clans had been the most straightforward. Their representative, a 3-meter-tall humanoid named Gornag, had simply said, "We smash. You point us at enemy. We smash them good." Sarah had found herself liking the Titans immediately. By the time they reached the Sol system, the gathering fleet was the largest armada in known history. Nearly 3,000 ships from 47 different species, all united by a single goal, stopping the Devourers. The sight that greeted them at Earth was breathtaking. The orbital shipyards that had once produced a few dozen ships per year were now launching new vessels daily. The asteroid belt had been transformed into a massive mining and manufacturing complex. Even the gas giants were being harvested, their atmospheres stripped to fuel the war effort. Admiral Chen, came the voice of Fleet Admiral Morrison as the Defiant entered Earth orbit. Welcome home.
we need to talk.
The briefing room in Fleet Command was packed with the highest-ranking officers from every species in the Alliance. Sarah found herself at the head of a table that included Battle Commander Thektar, Synthesis of the Ethereal Collective, Gornag of the Titan clans, and dozens of other alien leaders whose names she was still learning. The situation is this, Morrison began, activating the holographic display.
We have confirmed the Devourer fleet's position and trajectory.
They will enter the Centauri system in 14 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days.
A murmur ran through the assembled officers.
Centauri was humanity's oldest colony, home to nearly 50 million people. Evacuation is proceeding on schedule, Morrison continued, but we're not running.
Admiral Chen's plan has been approved at the highest levels. We're going to make our stand at Centauri. The preparations? Sarah asked. Are extensive. We're turning the entire system into a fortress. Orbital defense platforms, asteroid fortresses, minefields, automated weapon systems. Every approach vector will be covered. And we're not just defending, we're baiting a trap.
The display shifted to show the Centauri system as it would appear to the Devourers. The outer planets had been stripped of their resources, but instead of being consumed, those resources had been converted into weapons. The asteroid belt had been turned into a maze of hidden gun emplacements. The gas giants now harbored massive fleets of ships, hidden by sensor dampeners and waiting for the signal to attack. It's ambitious, observed Thektar.
But the Devourers are not stupid.
They will detect the deception.
Will they? Sarah activated her own display.
The Zephyrian data shows that the Devourers have encountered resistance before, but never coordinated resistance. They expect individual species to fight desperately for their home systems.
They expect fortifications, minefields, last-ditch stands.
What they don't expect is a trap spanning an entire star system, coordinated by 47 different species.
And if they detect it anyway? Asked Synthesis.
Then we fight anyway, Sarah replied simply.
Because if we don't stop them here, they'll consume the entire galaxy. This isn't just about survival anymore.
It's about the future of intelligent life itself.
The room fell silent as the implications sank in.
They were about to attempt something that had never been done in galactic history, a unified defense by multiple species against a common threat.
One more thing, Morrison added.
Intelligence suggests that the Devourers have been monitoring our communications.
They know we're preparing for them.
They're coming to Centauri not just to harvest resources, but to make an example. They want to show the galaxy what happens to those who resist.
Good, Sarah said firmly. Let them come. Let them bring their entire fleet. Because we're going to show them what happens when you threaten Earth. The planning sessions that followed were intense and exhausting.
Coordinating the defense of an entire star system with 47 different species, each with their own tactics, technology, and cultural approaches to warfare, was like trying to conduct a symphony with instruments from different dimensions. The Krotak wanted to meet the enemy head-on, ship-to-ship combat in the grand tradition of their warrior culture. The Ethereal Collective preferred subtle electronic warfare, disrupting enemy systems from within. The Titan clans wanted to board enemy vessels and fight hand-to-hand. The Archivists wanted to use ancient weapons that no one else understood. It was Sarah who finally found the solution. We're not going to fight like one species, she announced during a particularly heated debate. We're going to fight like 47 species. Each of us will do what we do best, when we do it best, where we do it best. She activated the tactical display, showing the Centauri system divided into zones. The Krotak will handle the outer system, meet them in open space where your heavy ships can maneuver. The Ethereal Collective will hit their command and control systems as they enter the system. The Titan clans will be our boarding parties, taking out key ships from within. The Archivists will deploy their ancient weapons at critical moments.
And the humans? Asked Thektar. Sarah smiled grimly. We'll do what humans always do.
We'll be everywhere, adapting, improvising, refusing to quit. We'll coordinate the defense, plug holes in the line, and make sure that when the Devourers arrive, they find not separate species fighting individual battles, but a unified galaxy determined to survive. The next 14 months passed in a blur of preparation. The Centauri system was transformed from a peaceful colony into the most heavily fortified position in known space.
Hidden weapons platforms were embedded in asteroids. Entire fleets were concealed in the magnetospheres of gas giants. The system's star itself was turned into a weapon, with solar collection arrays that could focus stellar energy into devastating beams. But the most important preparations were not technological.
They were psychological. For the first time in galactic history, different species were learning to work together, to trust each other, to fight as one. Sarah found herself at the center of it all, coordinating between species that had never even known of each other's existence months before. She became a translator not just of languages, but of concepts, strategies, and hopes.
You realize, Morrison said during one of their planning sessions, that if this works, you'll have changed the galaxy forever. Species that have fought each other for millennia are now fighting side by side. And if it doesn't work? Sarah asked.
Then it won't matter what we've changed.
The Devourers will consume it all anyway.
3 weeks before the projected arrival of the Devourer fleet, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the Defiant, looking out at the assembled armada. Nearly 5,000 ships from 47 species, all waiting for the battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy.
Second thoughts? Commander Hayes asked, joining her at the viewport. Every day, Sarah admitted. But not about the plan. About whether we're strong enough to execute it. You've seen the simulations. We have a chance. A chance, Sarah repeated. Against an enemy that's been consuming galaxies for millennia. Against a force that's never been defeated. Against odds that any sane person would call impossible.
Then it's a good thing we're not sane, Hayes said with a grin.
We're human.
Sarah found herself laughing despite the gravity of the situation. And Krotak, and Ethereal, and Titan, and 44 other species that refuse to go quietly into the night. The Devourers are going to be very surprised.
I hope so. Because if they're not...
Sarah looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, a fleet of unimaginable destruction was bearing down on them. If they're not, then we're all dead, and the galaxy becomes a very quiet place. The first sign of the Devourer fleet's arrival came not from sensors, but from the stars themselves. The long-range observatories detected the gravitational distortions first, massive objects moving at tremendous speeds, bending spacetime around them. Then came the energy signatures, the telltale signs of thousands of fusion reactors and weapon systems powering up.
Admiral, Torres reported from the communications station, we're receiving signals from the outer perimeter.
The Devourers are here. Sarah felt her heart rate increase, but her voice remained steady.
How many? Preliminary count shows over 4,000 vessels.
They're arranged in the standard harvesting formation, command ships in the center, escort vessels in protective shells around them, harvesting craft along the edges.
Exactly as expected, Sarah said with satisfaction. Signal all Allied commanders. Operation Ragnarok is now active.
The Devourer fleet entered the Centauri system like a plague of locusts descending on a field of grain. Their formation was perfect, their movements coordinated with machine precision. They had done this thousands of times before, and they approached the system with the confidence of predators who had never met their match. The first phase of the battle began at the edge of the system, where the Krotak Third Warfleet waited among the outer planets. Battle Commander Thektar had positioned his ships in what appeared to be a desperate last stand, exactly what the Devourers expected from a species facing extinction. Devourer forward elements are engaging the Krotak fleet, Wong reported. They're taking heavy fire but holding position.
Sarah nodded.
The Krotak were tough, and they were buying time for the rest of the plan to unfold.
Phase 2? Ethereal Collective is in position. They're beginning their infiltration of the Devourer command network. Deep within the enemy fleet, the beings of pure energy that made up the Ethereal Collective began their invisible war.
They slipped through the Devourer communications networks like ghosts, inserting viruses, corrupting data, and slowly but steadily degrading the enemy's ability to coordinate their attacks.
Phase 3? Titan clans are launching their boarding pods.
They're targeting the smaller escort vessels. Across the battlefield, the massive warriors of the Titan clans were doing what they did best, getting up close and personal with their enemies. Their boarding pods, heavily armored and bristling with weapons, punched through devourer hulls and disgorged teams of 3-meter-tall warriors eager for hand-to-hand combat. But the devourers were adapting. They had faced desperate resistance before, and they began to adjust their tactics. The forward elements pulled back, allowing the heavier ships to move forward. The command ships began broadcasting new orders, coordinating a more systematic approach to the system's defenses. They're learning, Sarah observed. Time for Phase 4. Archivists are powering up their ancient weapons. Energy readings are off the charts. The Archivists, the galaxy's oldest known species, had remained neutral in most conflicts for millions of years. But they had been watching, learning, and preparing. The weapons they now deployed were beyond current understanding, devices that bent reality itself, turning the vacuum of space into a weapon. Entire squadrons of devourer ships simply ceased to exist as the Archivists' weapons activated. Not destroyed, simply edited out of reality as if they had never been. "My God," whispered Hayes. "How is that possible?" "I don't know," Sarah admitted, "and I don't care. As long as it works." But the devourers were not helpless. They had encountered strange weapons before, and they adapted quickly. The command ships began implementing new defensive protocols, their shields shifting to frequencies that the Archivist weapons couldn't penetrate. "Admiral," Torres called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the Devourer fleet. They're attempting to communicate." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. In all the intelligence gathered about the Devourers, there had been no mention of them attempting communication during battle. "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was cold, mechanical, utterly without emotion. "Biological entities. Your resistance is noted but irrelevant. We are the Devourer. We have consumed 1,000 galaxies. Your individual species show promise, but you cannot comprehend our purpose. Surrender now, and your termination will be swift." Sarah stood, her voice carrying across the bridge. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Forces, speaking on behalf of the Galactic Alliance. We've received your message, and we have a response." She paused, looking around at her mixed crew of humans and aliens, all united in defiance. "Our response is this: we are not separate species fighting individual battles. We are one galaxy, united in purpose. We have learned from each other, fought beside each other, and died for each other. And we will not go quietly into the night." The mechanical voice returned, now with what might have been curiosity. "Unprecedented. Multiple species coordinating defense. This behavior pattern has not been observed in previous harvesting operations. Analysis indicates significant strategic revision required." "You want to analyze us?" Sarah's voice hardened. "Then analyze this. We're from worlds that tried to kill us every day. We're the children of predators and prey, of chaos and order, of a universe that made us fight for every breath we took. And we learned something that you never will, that together, we're stronger than the sum of our parts.